Saturday, the 1st of the 11th, 2025. The time is 10 minutes past 10, and that means, as always, one thing, that there are a multitude of F1-centric threads at which we need to pull. Lewis Hamilton's interview with Scuderia Ferrari. He's talked about everything, the brand symbiosis between brand Hamilton. I'm a business man, not a business man. We'll talk about that. So too, we'll talk about concerns that Lewis Hamilton won't be able to deliver, and that reports that Scuderia Ferrari are now sniffing around another driver. He has a name. His name is King George Russell of Kings Lynn Norfolk. We'll talk about all FIA legal action, high tech, Susie Wolff, DOJ issues, Dave Richards, and now undemocratic Laura Villas. It's going to get techier than techie things. We'll preview Brazil because there's a couple bits and bobs I want to talk about, not least of which weather and therefore odds. It will get techie. We will have to get techie this Saturday morning, each and every single time. Oscar Piastri has not signed a contract with Ferrari. There is this thing, ladies and gentlemen, of the F1 jury called trust, journalistic integrity. There are very many outlets now just peddling out whatever will get the click. Beware of them. For the avoidance of doubt, all F1 publications and journalists are created equal, but some are created more equal than others. Oscar Piastri has not signed a contract with Scuderia Ferrari. That doesn't mean to say he won't at some point in the future, that potentially Mark Webber is peddling out this propaganda with a view to keep McLaren on their toes. But that hasn't happened, not just yet. In the first instance, let's talk about Colapinto. Speculation word on the F1 curb is that this dude has already signed himself an extension to his Alpine contract. There's a Mercado Libre Annuncio advertisement going around, and some people are saying that that must mean that Franco Colapinto is on board, that Flavio Briatore has sacked off completely Jack Doohan, and therefore his aspirations of driving an Alpine car at any point in the very near future, that Franco Colapinto will be an Alpine driver next year. How do we feel about that? I don't know. I remember when Franco Colapinto came in on a wing and a prayer, everybody thought, well, he looks like Ayrton Senna, so therefore that must mean he drives like him. I think he's been up and down, peaks and troughs. At his very best, he's proven himself, F-boy, worthy of being an F1 driver, but his very worst, he can barely keep the car on the island, and I would think that that's a concern, especially when you benchmark him against the likes of Antonelli and Isaac Hadjar, and now Ollie Behrman, who are doing one of these, and Franco Colapinto. I don't know. I feel like he's on the receiving end of some poor car tax. And that's a poor car tax that, of course, if you're going to assess his performance in earnest, that you want to normalise for. Oh, and by the way, Sir Lewis Hamilton. We've got to talk about Sir Lewis. It's all kicking off. In fact, before we get to Sir Lewis, let me show you a couple of different things. Brazil next weekend, yeah? 2024. Max Verstappen. Masterclass 2016. Suffice to say that one Maximilian Verstappen, go for some say soon to be 5-time champion, historically past his prologue, goes very well around Interlagos. Here's what the weather forecast is saying by dint of Google. Saturday, rain. Sunday, worse rain. If we have therefore ourselves monsoon conditions, I think the likes of Lando and Oscar Piastri and the other drivers are each going to struggle. Now, Regenmeister Lewis Hamilton, he'll be all right, won't he? Especially if he's had his Weetabix. So too, Max Verstappen, who is also Regenmeister. He will be okay, as he was in 24 and very famously in 2016. However, the odds makers apparently haven't paid attention to this. This is not financial advice, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury, but you mean to tell me that Lando Norris and Max Verstappen are equal favourites? Now, I know that McLaren is a god tier car, and I know that Lando Norris is now en hora buena, the greatest form, some say, of his life. But to say that Lando Norris, if we run the Brazilian Grand Prix next weekend under the current circumstances, will win 38% of the time, the same amount as Max Verstappen, is false. That, ladies and gentlemen, is promotional malpractice. That's just bad maths, isn't it? Oh, and by the way, Lewis Hamilton has given an interview, and in that interview, Ferrari.com, he's spoken about all of his circumstances. In the first instance, he talks about the passion of jumping into a red car with a yellow badge and the black prancing horse atop for the first time, that it was unlike anything that he'd ever done before, that when he was 21, there was enthusiasm, but not necessarily the passion. There was excitement, but there's something about the red car, Lewis says, that was just a bit different. How does the Scuderia Ferrari HP experience compare to other teams? The interviewer asked. Lewis Hamilton responds, and I quote, "The others are a bit less colourful. They all have their qualities, but Italians wear their emotions more obviously for good and for bad." Interesting. Interesting, that for Lewis. He's giving the interview to Ferrari.com and he's still talking about overall positivity, of course, but for good and for bad. Interesting. But I mean, he's got to stay true to form, right? If he just talked about positivity, if it was a propaganda interview, then people wouldn't believe him. Of course there is bad. Indeed, you might want to argue at the time of writing that there is infinitely more bad than good. They can't build themselves a car. They're ifing and butting around Frederick Vasseur versus Christian Horner. Yeah, they signed Frederick Vasseur's extension, but pseudo begrudgingly. John Elkann, the politics, Frederick Vasseur has not been able to circle the wagons around his human resource from all of the shenanigans, the C-suite exec level bods and their influence in the way that Jean Todt did, with a view to unlock performance going forward. And then you've got the drivers. What do we do about the drivers? Well, Charles Leclerc sounds like he doesn't want to be there. Nicolas Todt, Jean Todt, ironically, his son, now manager of Team Charles Leclerc, is looking around potentially, because if Scuderia Ferrari do what they did in 2025, in 2026, and don't build themselves a car, then Charles Leclerc's given enough, right? 7 seasons deep. How many more seasons do you expect him to give? And of course, Sir Lewis Hamilton gives this interview under that aegis. There is a dark cloud of uncertainty over Maranello and Fiorano, and 2026, there is a lot that hinges upon what Ferrari do between now and then. Per Christian Horner, fix your fudging car. Lewis Hamilton continues, there are a lot of qualities, but Italians wear their emotions more obviously for good and for bad, but mostly for good. I think you see the passion every day. There's the propaganda, Lewis Hamilton, right? Mr. PR, Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson Hamilton. You see the passion every day in the way the Italians talk about food, for example. Not to typecast any, Sir Lewis. In England, you don't get excited talking about fish and chips, you know. Fair play, Lewis. He's not. Listen, I don't disagree with anything that he's saying, but I think the tone of the interview and the timing of it is interesting, because Fiorano and Maranello for the longest time this year have been giving the side eye to Sir Lewis Hamilton. $70 million is his remuneration, rumoured. All the while, Carlos Sainz now going great guns at Williams. Mr. Technical Feedback, Mr. Carlos Sainz. A Carlos Sainz tide floats all F1 constructor boats. You know the drill already. Every time Carlos Sainz, if past his prologue, has joined an F1 team, they've been here in the constructors, and when he leaves them, they are here. Be interesting to see what happens when Lewis leaves, potentially in a couple of years' time. Bearing in mind, the word on the F1 curb is that he has himself a 2+1 contract. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And George Russell and potential suitors. An interesting point in the interview, Lewis Hamilton is asked about Niki Lauda. The question comes like this. This is the 50th anniversary of Niki Lauda's first championship victory with Ferrari. You became very close to him. What influence did he have on you? Lewis Hamilton responds as follows. This is techie than techie things. When I got to F1, Niki was part of a world that couldn't adapt to me being different, and I heard negative things, though I'd always had an admiration for him as a 3-time world champion. Bloody Nora, Lewis. What are we doing, mate? Listen, and I don't doubt for a second the veracity of what Lewis is saying. This is chaos. This is this. Why is Lewis saying this now? Of course, he's talking to his truth. I don't think there's not. Look at me, just baffled. I don't know. As I read that in the first instance, I was like, holy smoke. Why is Lewis saying that now? It feels like Lewis is putting forth his exhibit A, B and C, not excusing his performance, but justifying it. He's saying that the cultural differences between Mercedes, what he was used to, carbon industry as versus Ferrari now, Brembo discs and pads, that analogy runs throughout everything that Ferrari do. That initially, Niki Lauda and the difficulties, he talk about Mercedes now, of course, that there were just cultural differences. That's the thread that runs throughout this interview. He's talking about it in earnest, that these things haven't gone away. And of course, there will be a downside ramifications. This will permeate his performance. It's difficult for Sir Lewis yet and still. Now, I've said on a gazillion occasions that he's the 7-time champion, GOAT settings, first round Hall of Fame. And I can't extend Lewis Hamilton the same amount of grace that I would a Carlos Sainz Jr. or an Alex Albon or even an Antonelli or a Behrman rookie or any of those, but Hadjar as an example. Because why? Because he's Lewis Hamilton. To extend him grace ad infinitum will be to do the Lewis Hamilton legacy a disservice, in my humble opinion. However, it seems like Lewis, what he's saying here without saying it, is that times are hard at Ferrari. It is difficult sending out memos, trying to influence and impact positively the working culture at Ferrari. I will never forget when Lewis Hamilton rocked up to the Canadian Grand Prix and he talked about the way watching the team set up the car, the engineers, and he was like, his words, not mine, this doesn't make sense. What are you doing, guys? Like, I've been to Canada and won around here a gazillion times. What are you doing? This is not what good looks like. Lewis Hamilton's words and not mine. And I think he's speaking about that surreptitiously somehow. You got to read between the lines. Lewis Hamilton is telling us it's not easy over at the red team. It's not all roses. That there is positive, and of course it's a passion and it's a bucket list item that he wanted to tick off as far as his F1 career. But yet and still, laced in and amongst all that is hardship. Another question that he's asked: what do you say to all those who suggest that this extracurricular stuff is a distraction? Now, you told me this, chat. If this were a propaganda interview, Scuderia Ferrari, do you think they would even ask Lewis Hamilton that question? That you're distracted, mate, that there's too many extracurricular activities, that you're spreading yourself too thin. Therefore, in brackets, there are downside repercussions, pun intended, on your performance. I think this interview is techie. The answers are techie, but the questions are even techier. Now, of course, that's a question that I would love to ask Sir Lewis Hamilton, but that Scuderia Ferrari are asking him that screams louder. Lewis Hamilton's answer comes back as follows. It's not a question of distraction. Oh, the humanity, chat. You say techie, then techie things. Everyone, continues Lewis Hamilton, says, quote, can get distracted one way or another. Oh, Lewis, what are we saying there? It's about how you decide to deploy your energy and create a sense of balance. You've got to have a creative balance. You can't just work every hour of your life because you'll be miserable. True. How do you find things that inspire you and keep you uplifted? Tapping into creativity is one way. Oh, the humanity. This is... I just... Listen, I think more that they ask him the question speaks volumes. Ferrari, this, by the way, a publication. Now, listen, I don't know where we go from here as far as Sir Lewis is concerned and Scuderia Ferrari. However, Corriere della Sera, again, a Stellantis-owned publication. Stellantis, bearing in mind, are the group that own Fiat and therefore Ferrari. They've published some articles, and that the rumor and speculation always happens as far as the Italians are concerned, always. And again, remember that all F1 publications are created equal, but some are created more equal than others. Here's where it gets techie. There is chat that Ferrari, as they circled around Christian Horner before with a view to sign him, are now looking at one King George Russell. Now, the context is this. The driver silly season next year will be chaos. It's a brand new rule and reg spec, 50% ice, 50% electric. It's all chaos, active aero, all this madness going on. So you bet your bottom dollar there will be shifts, tectonic shifts, as far as the F1 competitive landscape is concerned. There will be, and the likes of Max Verstappen, you'll have your god tier ones. Max, okay, so Lewis, still god tier, but 41 years old as at February of next year. So it will be Lewis. He won't have a say necessarily, because again, people will be looking to sign a driver that can do it in long form. Those are their time horizons that they'll be working for. Here's where it's techie though, chat. George, Charles, Max, they'll have their pick of the litter next year. George, what do you think George is going to do? Especially given the way that he will, at the very least, feel like he's been disrespected by Toto, the boy who cried wolf, on the back of an era-defining, a career-defining performance in 2025. George hasn't been bad here, and they want to fling at him a 1+1. Don't you remember, Toto, the reason why Lewis left in the first place is because you tried the same thing with him. George always says that didn't do too badly against one of the greatest drivers that we've ever seen in history. He always, in his own mind at least, will benchmark himself against Sir Lewis Hamilton. So what makes you think that he won't be comparing his 1+1 to Lewis's 1+1? And the fact that Lewis left will make George want to leave if, of course, there is a better opportunity. Let's play a hypothetical game. Therefore, imagine Ferrari build a championship winning red car with a yellow badge and the black prancing horse atop next year. Just imagine. Imagine that Charles Leclerc stays, and imagine he outperforms Sir Lewis Hamilton to the tune of 50 points again, just as he has done this year, season to date. Don't think for a second that they won't be looking to an Ollie Behrman or a George Russell if indeed he is available. And Corriere della Sera, excuse me, are now saying the same thing. The Ferrari, that the chat is that Ferrari have been sniffing around George Russell, that they're keen, that they like his ability to dial down, that they like the fact that he's not only quick, but that he contributes to the broader team piece, that he has the level of technical feedback akin to a Carlos Sainz Jr., the thing that they've just lost out the team. That he's marketable, that he's got this English gentleman thing about him, that not only is he quick in terms of absolute performance, but he's an Alain Prost-esque points accumulator. That's what Scuderia Ferrari need, especially if Sir Lewis, again, continues to have an adverse variance performance versus expectation. I hope Sir George stays with Mercedes. Me too, Tony. It'd be one of those weird ones, I'll be honest with you. Just like seeing Max in like an overall that's not a Red Bull Racing one. That would get a bit techie for me. It feels like it would be a bend in the space-time continuum per se, a paradigm shift as far as F1's concerned. Different strokes, different stroke, different folks. Different strokes for different folks. All the drivers. Go on then, Steve. Let me read this out. All the drivers are individuals and ages have to manage their own work-life balance. Go on then, Stephen. The problem with that, Stephen, is this, mate. Nobody cares. Just like I've said about Lando Norris for the longest time. Lando can go and do whatever he wants when he's performing like he did at the Mexican Grand Prix. Everybody, myself included, has to just STFU. You know what I mean? I've got nothing to say when Lando... I can't talk about British Vogue or the starts or him not prioritising quite openly the championship in 2024. I can't, if he's going to go out and perform like that and maximize for his not insubstantial potential, then I've got to STFU. Got to take all the seats, 10 toes. That there's nothing for me to say. But when he does not, people are always going to, it's this availability heuristic thing, isn't it? People are always going to look to what Lando Norris isn't doing when he's underperforming, and maybe up off and near, draw together, connect some causation dots. If Benz is a rocket ship in 2026, he will not want to leave 100%, Frank. And these are the ifs and the buts, right? This is all that the foundation of all of this argument is conjecture and speculation. See, Sir George Russell, he's not been a bad peddler. I hope George stays. The Ferrari is a Lululemon. It is this year at least, Michael. Don't matter what the drivers do if the car is a ish box, 100%, mate. Max versus Yuki. No, Yuki's got... All right, listen. Go on, let me tell you about Yuki very quickly, because I feel like there was a lot made of Yuki's performance in Mexico. He was closer to Max than he's been season to date. But the problem for Yuki is this, right? 7 races, back-to-back, no points. Already, that casts you out as a Red Bull Racing driver. There has been no one, not Alex Albon, not Pierre Gasly back in the day. There's been no one who's undergone, experienced that extent of poor performance for that long. 7 races back to back and no points. Listen, they were set to announce, weren't they, that Yuki Tsunoda was going to be an F1 driver, a Red Bull Racing driver into 2026 or not, as at the Mexican Grand Prix. But because of what happened at Mexico, that Yuki held off Oscar Piastri, that he was the that he almost allowed the Red Bull sword of Damocles to be wielded on him, sacrifice his race at the altar of Maximilian Verstappen's performance, then I think they thought, you know what, this is poor form. If we sack off Yuki after he literally laid down, did the Sir Francis Drake thing, do you know what I mean? Put his cloak down and allowed Max Verstappen to walk over it and not get his feet wet, euphemistically speaking. If that's what Yuki did, then to sack him off at the Mexican Grand Prix, if Red Bull Racing are invested in positive PR, is not a good look. Perhaps you can go into IndyCar with the Honda engines. Perhaps, Frank. I don't think there is space at the F1 in the Yuki Tsunoda next year. The $20 million USD that Honda are paying Red Bull Racing, that won't exist next year, because they'll be over as the exclusive engine manufacturer of Aston Martin. That is all to keep Yuki trying to prove himself, but Yuki knows that he has to know at this stage, Max. I don't think he's been good enough, sadly. As much Cam Yuki is a Mexican. Did I say that he was, Michael? I don't think I did. All I know is this. Yuki Tsunoda wasn't the best. He hasn't been the best all season long. I don't think he warrants an extension to his contract, especially, listen, if they didn't have another driver to promote, then cool. Maybe you just keep Yuki. But it's Arvid Lindblad coming up next, and Helmut Marko likes him, sees him as a potential next Red Bull Racing champ. Then you've got Hajar coming through. They'll promote him alongside Max Verstappen, so I just don't know. So Lewis Hamilton royalty says will increased Ferrari's value by $10 billion a year before arrived. Go on then, Will. We're talking some truth, value and objectivity. Do you want me to debunk this, Will, or would you rather believe an untruth? Go on, that's a common misconception. So what happened last year is that Ferrari announced Lewis Hamilton joining them in 2025 at the same time as their quarterly results came out. Now, what happens in the quarterly is that the market has an estimate of how much revenue. As an example, this year, Ferrari flopped to the rate. So go on, let me tell you, Will, if Lewis Hamilton was announced this year, the last couple of weeks when Ferrari had their quarterly announcements again, if they'd done it this year, you wouldn't have seen the uptick. Why? Because in order to trigger that sort of share price increase, you need to beat your analyst estimates. When Lewis Hamilton was announced as a Ferrari driver last year for this, they had a massive beat as far as their quarterly results at the same time. So it was a symbiosis. It was a domino effect. It was Lewis Hamilton, but I'd argue that the foundation, the biggest percentage of the causation pie, was the quarterly financial statement beat. And then on top of that, you had the sprinkles of Sir Lewis Hamilton. I'd argue if it were the quarterly results that Ferrari put out a couple of weeks ago, 9.8 billion revenue was the expectation. Ferrari barely hit 9 billion flat. So they were 0.8 billion behind in revenue. Hypothesize this, Will. If they were announcing Sir Lewis Hamilton as a Red Bull, as a Ferrari driver for next year, in conjunction with those quarterly results, which were a massive loss, a massive fail versus estimates, then Lewis Hamilton's, the impact would have been dwarfed. You wouldn't have seen that, basically. That's what I'm saying. If the results last year were not a beat, if they weren't positive as far as the forecast, then you wouldn't have seen that. Ferrari EV set it is chaos, Michael. It is, yeah. Correct. The good results were perfect. Yeah, it was good results. It was a beat versus analyst estimates plus the Lewis Hamilton thing. So I just don't think Ferrari had no sponsorship before Sir Lewis Hamilton royalty. Yeah, the sponsorship. Well, I don't. See, Will. That's not true either, is it? It's good that more sponsorship. Sponsors are absolutely prepared to pay more money, but I think we want to be precise with our language here. It's good that here the HP deal, the title sponsorship, is a big deal. And all the sponsors are prepared to pay more money, of course, with Lewis Hamilton in the red overalls. But I don't want to embellish the truth, not when it comes to numbers, because it's evidensibly correct. Neil says, "Come, bro, multiplier." There we go. The whole industry done bad, to be fair, not just Ferrari, Porsche as well. Yeah, I'm not talking this. You're right, TWM. It's chaos for car manufacturers out there at the moment. Nobody's buying. Who's got money to buy a brand new car with depreciation? No, especially with electric cars doing what they're doing. I don't know. It's all in a bit of stasis. Nobody knows what the next thing is going to do. Then you've got interest rates and hyperinflation. If you're talking about the broader economic picture, then I don't know, nice to have items like cars all of a sudden get deprioritized, right? And then you've got BYD and all these Chinese manufacturers coming out and they're making cars for a tenner and selling them for 15 quid. It's disruption across the market. It's chaos. No one wants electric 911s. I don't think I'll be getting into this, Michael. Apparently we've gone full car send, but I think there is a link to F1 somehow. Because again, F1 prides itself on being the bastion, the pioneer of all things innovative as far as the car industry is concerned. But as far as the actual sales of cars, chaos. You just can't keep up. China are destroying everything, right? Producing things at a much lower operating cost than us over here in Europe and North America. It's going to get techie. BMW didn't. BMW stock is up. Go bro. Just hug the customer that what they want. BMW perfect in the 90s. Go on then, you're talking, Michael. We've gone full rogue here. What about the F1 chat? Ferrari need to sniff the crap out of their own shoes before they sniffed it. What is the BYD? Can you imagine TWM? Oh, the humanity. And the joke, I tell you what the joke is, TWM as you round third. The likes of Stefano Domenicali and Mohammed Ben Sulayem have already talked about wanting to get a North Asian owner in F1 because it would be gangbusters. If you are talking, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury, about potential growth markets, then of course you've got to talk about North America. But what is untapped, the most untapped, the biggest upside as far as growth markets is of course North Asia. They get techie than techie things if they get a BYD or a Hyundai or someone like that. Because again, and then on top of that, you want to put in there a North Asian driver. Bless Tsunoda-san, but a proper North Asian driver that can win races in a North Asian car. Oh, the humanity. It would get techie. BYD battery tech is surprising the way. 100%. They're down the road, technologically speaking. The truth is, cheap ain't good and good ain't cheap. That's techie. Not necessarily, Tony. But in have you seen interest rates, Tony? 10%. APR. Who has money for that? It's a different world. It's heat or eat at the moment. Cost of living is chaos. Even when you look at your F1 TV sponsorship, another thing that we should talk about. Even when you look at your subscription, if there are things that you're going to take off, do you know what I mean, with a view to save some money, then F1 subscription might well be it, particularly over here in the UK, when you're paying yourself if you want HD TV level picture quality. Why not sack that off? Nobody's got £90 to pay to Sky, or bloody stream it somewhere else, right? Like it's no, it's techie. Can Ferrari build a car in 2026? Well, of course they can, Payne, but whether they will is a different matter altogether. They were close in 2024. Remember, towards the end of that season, they had the quickest car, some said. And again, they were only a stone throw away from winning the Constructors' Championship. Per Zach Brown's book, 7/10 or whatever. It was close, but then they decided to make another low-level, Nick Mark, you're a legend. They decided to make another low-level poor decision and completely revamp the car in a direction that hasn't proved fruitful. It's not yielded any performance like McLaren and their ambitious suspension shed. But that's always what they do, isn't it? Not paying them. Go on then to that point. It's getting techie over at YouTube, isn't it? I saw an article that said that North American fans won't be able to watch F1 on YouTube. The Apple are doing the Apple thing and circling the wagons around their brand new proposition. Lest we forget, 150 million per year is how much they're going to pay at F1 for the exclusive rights to broadcast all F1 in North America. It's going to get techie. I'll tell you what, MBS already ruined. A lot of things would be a cut before I cancel. Let's go, Stephen. Let's go. Appreciate you, mate. The future of F1 will be in Chinese and Arabian hands, I think. Have you seen Riyadh season, Frank? Chaos. We'll have to have that conversation another day. It is proper chaos over here. The landscape is shifting. You see that HBO and bloody, they're all like downsizing and reducing their operating costs desperately. Desperately. Ray, you're a legend, mate. I think Ferrari will be back in 2026. But how many times have people been saying that now? Could have said that every single season for the past like 18. Do you know what I mean? And you might have been right each and every single time, but ultimately history would have made a mug of you. And we all hail Frederick Vasseur as a great TP and Lucy's championship winning experience 2025. But Neil, And Father Christmas is going to come down the chimney and deliver my Christmas presents this year as well, isn't he? It's I got iPhone news. Guys, I'm gonna run. It's been techie, then techie things per usual. Brand new George Russell merch will be in the bloody store and the shelf. There'll be Max Verstappen merch coming out soon. If you are that way inclined, it's Christmas around the corner. Do yourself a favour and copy yourself some Elated Peddlers. We will be in the Discord talking about all things F1 tomorrow, 2 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. It's been techier than techie things and emotional. Between now and next time, the prosecution rests. No further questions.